They deserved to have their story told. And we needed to vindicate Shan'ann's memory, that Shan'ann loved her girls, and that she didn't have anything to do with their murders.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So that was the voice of Colorado Bureau of Investigation agent Tammy Lee giving an interview after the sentencing to a Oxygen documentary, I think, called Criminal Confessions. And in that documentary, she explains the interrogation process. She explains how they basically led Chris Watts where he was itching to go, which was to blame Shan'ann. Now, this episode shouldn't even be necessary. In fact, I don't really think it is necessary for a lot of people, but for a lot of people, maybe it is. It wouldn't have been necessary if there was a court case and Chris Watts is found guilty in a court of law. It seems as if the court of public opinion can decide whatever it wants to believe. But I just thought it would be good just to go through some of the reasons, if the case had gone to trial, how it would be easy to demonstrate that Shan'ann would never have harmed her children. And so we're going to deal with that in this episode. You may also want to look out for the episode after this, which will deal with the number 3 subject missing from the Netflix documentary American Murder, The Family Next Door. You may recall that I've already covered the number 1 subject missing, which was, remember the documentary was about Shan'ann Watts, like all about her. And so it was quite strange that they virtually completely excised the multi-level marketing / Thrive narrative out of that, and to some extent the debt that the family were facing. The number 2 subject missing was Nicole Kessinger. There was just a tiny passing reference to her in the documentary, perhaps understandably because it was about Shan'ann. But in this 3rd episode, we're going to look at something that absolutely shouldn't have been left out of a documentary about Shan'ann. And I wonder if any of you can guess what that ought to be. In any event, if you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, please do. Thank you very much to the 200 or so subscribers who've subscribed in the last couple of days. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and leave a comment, and let's get started. So I think the strongest, or one of the strongest areas a defense case could have had against Shan'ann would have been if she had used alcohol, if she'd consumed alcohol during her pregnancy, and that would have proved that she was either negligent or that she was reckless, or whatever you want to say. And because of the autopsy results, there was kind of a secondary investigation, right? There was a kind of a secondary investigation where Detective Baumhover went and sort of questioned Shan'ann's friends and tried to make sure. So there was, first of all, a let's call it a circumstantial investigation, where you speaking to eyewitnesses, such as Nicole Atkinson, who was on the flight with Shan'ann back to Colorado, was with Shan'ann in Arizona, but other friends who'd stayed with Shan'ann, like Cassie and Christina Meacham, and other people who were with her, while she was eating and doing her thing in Scottsdale, Arizona. And so that was on the one side of the kind of investigation. The other side was purely forensics, looking at what the toxicology represented, how the chemistry was sort of put together, if that makes sense. Now, I must admit, I had quite a strong bias that I actually thought she may have consumed alcohol, and I'll tell you why. She was very stressed over the last weekend of her life. Understandably, she was very concerned. She was very worried. She wasn't feeling very well. She was in a state of great uncertainty because her husband was lying to her, kind of gaslighting her, whatever. And so it would be understandable in a way. And yet she still didn't drink alcohol. So, the other thing is a place where a lot of people are very tempted to drink alcohol, and I'm one of them, is when you are on a flight, especially a long flight, especially a flight that is late at night, and perhaps you can't sleep, you can't sort of shut down your mind, and so circumstantially, without knowing the facts, it seemed like there might be quite a good case that Shan'ann had consumed alcohol, and it turned out she hadn't. Not only circumstantially, where all of her friends said no, but also in the house there was very little alcohol to be found. And then also, how can I put it, the toxicology, I actually independently had a forensic scientist go and check the data independently, right? And when I first told him about the results, he was like, wow, that is like 3 times the drinking limit. That's how much alcohol she had in her system. And it seemed unlikely that could occur, that amount of alcohol could accumulate through natural decomposition. And guess what? It did. In fact, it sort of basically was exactly what you would predict given how long she had died and how long she was buried. Of course, we don't know exactly what the time of death was for any of these people in this case, but what we do know is that Shan'ann was, her body, it took quite long to recover her body. She was murdered early Monday morning, and her body was only exhumed late on Wednesday night. In fact, very close to Thursday morning. But the point is, Shan'ann didn't consume alcohol, and so what that shows is that she was, in a way, caring about her unborn child, and that she was a good mother in that sense. Another excellent example of why Shan'ann wouldn't have harmed her children is borne out in the phone data review, not once but several times. And of course, Nutgate is this sort of huge episode. And what is the underlying theme in Nutgate? It is that Shan'ann was very protective of her children, and you could even argue overprotective. But you might not like that term. You might say, oh no, she wasn't overprotective, she was appropriately protective, right? But the point is, she certainly wasn't negligent. If you're overprotective, it's the opposite of being negligent. And so, and I'm going to confirm this, I'm going to provide more reinforcement to this a little bit later in this episode. But Shan'ann was like a tigress for her cubs. She was a very protective mother in that sense. Another way of sort of extrapolating Shan'ann's psychology, the way that Shan'ann thought of herself, the way that she treated her progeny, is to look at, besides how she treated her own children, is to look at just the question, who wanted the baby in the end, right? So at the end, right at the very end, which one of the Watts couple wanted the baby? And the answer is clearly that she did. She even felt that, I'm just saying what she communicated was that she felt that her children, including the baby, didn't deserve a broken home, and that's absolutely true for all children and kind of all families. And one wonders whether some of that didn't come out of Shan'ann's own backstory, that sentiment. Shan'ann repeatedly says, she went to the ultrasound on the 8th of August, which I believe was a Wednesday, and she said she squeezed Watts' hand and he didn't squeeze back. Right? So who wanted the baby in the end? Shan'ann. It's quite clear that Chris Watts killed Shan'ann because he didn't want the baby, not because he wanted the baby. And the same applies to the children. If he didn't want his own child, his own unborn child, and he did want a son, didn't that extend to his children as well? So he didn't want his unborn child, he didn't want his wife, and so didn't he also not want his children? And there's quite a lot of evidence that he was becoming increasingly standoffish to his children in the last days, that he was impatient with them, he was shouting at them, and not only that, they were also quite cool towards him. He was sort of in a strange place, and I think his children sensed it. And I want to be a bit more specific and talk a little bit about Shanann's August 4th Facebook post. And so the August 4th Facebook post is actually a echo of Nutgate, right? And you get a sense of what prompted that Facebook post from going through the phone data review. And obviously I've got a 50-part series about that. You can go to my playlist to follow that. But the issue was that Shan'ann responded to Nutgate in the way that she did, which happened on the 9th of July. So essentially about almost a month earlier, but let's say three and a half weeks earlier. And when Chris Watts arrived, Nutgate sort of resurfaced. She had to explain to him again what was going on. Why? Because he wasn't really paying attention when he was in Colorado. He was sort of umming and ahhing and saying what he thought she wanted to hear, but he wasn't really interested. He was just interested in Kissinger. He was just kind of taking another, almost like a hit, right? He was going on the roller coaster, and he just didn't really take Nutgate seriously until he arrived in North Carolina. And then I think he sort of weaponized Nutgate to sort of use that as a way of gaslighting her and her family, to basically let them believe Nutgate was the reason he wasn't happy with Shan'ann. Nutgate was the reason that he wasn't happy. And I don't think that Nutgate had nothing to do with his unhappiness, but obviously the main reason that he was behaving the way that he was Nicole Kissinger, and Nutgate was just a convenient sort of scapegoat. In any event, Shan'ann herself felt kind of guilty about, maybe not guilty, but she felt she had to explain herself when Watts arrived in North Carolina. And this explaining herself after Watts arrived on the 31st of July, and as I say, you can see this coming through in their text messages. Now bear in mind, they're both in North Carolina at the time, and yet they're both texting one another, especially at night, because they're sort of sleeping separately, and they also don't want to let on to Shanann's parents that they're arguing or what they are arguing about. And so they're texting one another, and because they're texting one another, there's a record of what is going on, what they're disagreeing about, how they're arguing with one another, and what about, and how Watts responds and what Shanann's saying. And all of it is ample evidence that Shan'ann is trying to protect her children. And eventually she writes this Facebook post on the 4th of August, which is kind of the a manifestation of what is going on her phone, where she basically is talking about the safety of her children. And so let's just read that. Shan'ann writes, "The older she gets," and obviously this is alongside a picture of Cece, so obviously the she's referring to is her youngest daughter, who's almost 3 years old. Well, at that stage she was 3 years old. She says, "The older she gets, the more scared I am to let her out into the real world, the world of evil, the world of hate, the world of bullying. I was reading a post the other day where a kid was being bullied at school because of his nut allergies, and a kid put a peanut in his drink as a joke. He could have died. The world is a scary place. I will do everything in my power to teach her right and to protect her. Right? And so this is what Shan'ann is saying 9 days before her death and also before the death of her children. She's saying, I'm going to do everything in my power to protect my child, my children. And what she's saying there was absolutely valid, because she didn't know it, but her life was at risk. The unborn child in her womb was at risk. In fact, Watts had just tried to kill that child on the 31st, the day that he arrived back, and he would try again on the 10th of August, the day that she left for Arizona. Her life was at risk, that unborn child's life was at risk, and her children's lives were at risk. So she had every right to feel the way that she did. There is, to some extent, a reason to be scared, to be cautious, and to want to protect your children. Another thing to bring up, and if the case went to trial, I think one of the most important aspects to address would be just the circumstantial thing of, so if Chris Watts didn't kill his children, if Shan'ann killed the children and he knew it, then why was he so unemotional about it? If he cared so much about his children, if he loved them and missed them and was so upset about what happened to them, then why didn't he show it ever? Why didn't he? Why was he able to do the Sermon on the Porch as sort of lightheartedly and nonchalantly as he did? Why was he so unaffected by what had just happened that he seemed to his colleagues to be acting normally? I think the only thing they sort of noticed about him was that he wasn't dressed quite as neat as usual, but otherwise he seemed completely normal. In his text he would say LOL and that sort of thing. Also, if he was so upset about what had happened to his children, why then go and aggravate that? Why do something so grotesque as stuffing their bodies, not just putting their bodies into oil, but actually stomping on their dead bodies through a very narrow thief hatch, and that kind of sacrilege, and that shows someone who has just lost all emotional connection to his children. Can you imagine Shan'ann doing that in a million years? I can't. So who showed emotion? I'm talking about in terms of the family, in terms of one another, in terms of what is going on, just in general. Shan'ann. Who didn't? Chris Watts. Even in the interrogation cubicle, Watts was confronted about his lack of emotion, and that is actually what led to him sort of confessing. That was the turning point when Agent Tammy Lee said to Chris Watts, you haven't shed one tear. Watts kind of realized, wow, they've actually caught me out. And it was shortly after that he asked to speak to his father. And then when he did that, he sort of put on this show, obviously putting his hands over his face to mask his lack of emotion, because perhaps he thought his father would be able to see through him. But he basically put his hands over his face and adopted a somber tone, and then lied to his own father about what had happened. The other thing that's crazy is subsequent to that, when he was talking about, the agents then came back in and interrogated him about, so where are the bodies? He explained that very matter-of-factly, which just shows you he was resigned to what he was doing. It was very matter-of-fact to him. And one of the ways I explain that lack of emotion isn't that he just doesn't have any emotion. That's not the explanation. it's partially through the fact that that it was a premeditated murder, and anything that's premeditated, you've already resigned yourself to what you're about to do. The standoffishness is him preparing himself emotionally for what he was about to do. So in other words, that standoffishness is him being emotional about what he's starting to decide to do, and that went on for a couple of weeks. The other aspect, which most people totally underestimate, is that he is an introvert, and so he doesn't show emotions, like he doesn't wear his emotions on the what do they say? He doesn't wear his emotions on his sleeves. So I just can't quite think of how you say that anymore. He doesn't wear his emotions, like obviously, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have emotions. And you actually saw him crying in court. And I've dealt with a lot of court cases, and there are very few perpetrators who do cry in court. Very few. So the point isn't that Chris Watts showed emotion, or he doesn't have emotion. He didn't have emotion towards his children because he'd resigned himself to getting rid of them. Does that make sense? Not does it make sense that he did that in the sense that he was right, but does it make sense, the argument that I'm making, does it seem to resonate with reality in that sense? Once again, we can look to the facts of the case to find reinforcement for what we're saying. Not that it's very hard, but do you remember the Myrtle Beach trampoline park? Well, there you see Shan'ann sitting and noticing Bella on the trampoline, and she's got her phone up and she's recording her. Bella's grandfather's also sort of attentive. What's Chris Watts doing? He's sitting in the back, probably looking at nude selfies of his mistress. He's totally out of the picture. And that was also something that someone who took that photo, someone who met Shan'ann at that trampoline park, also confirmed, was that he didn't seem at all interested, and that Shan'ann was a very hands-on mother. I think another obvious point to make when you want to say, a scenario where you want to say, well, Shan'ann killed the children, Chris Watts didn't. Well, who was having an affair? When you're having an affair, do you have your children's interests at heart? I'm not saying you necessarily don't, but who probably has them less at heart when someone's having an affair? And in this case, who definitely had them less at heart in terms of the couple? Well, the one having the affair.
So tell me what happened then. I believe you that you did nothing on your hands. What happened?
When I left, it's on video that I left and I was in my truck. I didn't load anything into my truck besides my tools, my container, my book bag, my water jug, my lunchbox.
Okay, but then what happened?
I drove out of the driveway.
No, before you drove out of the driveway. What happened with your wife and your kids?
I didn't do anything like that. They were still in the house.
Where are they? Where did they go?
I don't know, sir. I really don't know.
Your wife's not the type of person to vanish.
I know she's not.
She had 10 things on her schedule that meant she was going to be there the next day, that day, the day after that, with friends, with a doctor. Okay? She didn't leave because she wanted to.
Right.
So what happened?
I didn't do anything to her or the kids.
Was it an accident?
I didn't do anything.
Was it an accident?
There was no accident. I don't know if there was an accident in the house. I wasn't there for it.
It's a big deal if it's an accident, because we can work with that, Chris.
No.
And I think that's maybe what happened.
I did not cause an accident. I didn't do anything to my wife and kids.
Was it a misunderstanding?
There's no misunderstanding. We had that talk. There was a misunderstanding where I didn't tell her about the affair.
Okay.
I didn't. That was the misunderstanding.
Sure. Miscommunication,
yeah,
misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Good.
But I probably should have told her right then, honestly. Everything was out on the table anyways.
Right.
I should have just told her right then. But I didn't, because I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
What was your plan? What were you gonna do? I mean, how was the separation gonna work?
Like, once we got separated, I would get my own place, and then 50-50 split with the kids, that's what I was hoping.
Mm-hmm. What about Nikki?
Take it slow and just see if anything develops, like, when I'm, at my own place.
Okay.
I just find it hard to hear you talk about just having this emotional, conversation with Shan'ann, and you're bawling and crying together, and you have not shed one tear in 2 days that you've been here.
Not once.
Not one. And help me understand that, because I don't get it. These are your baby girls, and you have not shed one tear over them not being around. Chris, I lose my 4-year-old in the store for 10 seconds, and I start to go panic. I have not seen any of that from you at all. Help me understand that.
I love those girls. I would never do any just because I haven't shed a tear. Like, you gotta
Yeah, no,
realize.
that's weird. Is that weird?
Don't look into that like I don't love my
Well,
kids.
tell
I love
me,
my wife.
explain to me. You're crying with your wife that you're leaving her,
Yeah.
but you don't cry that your 2 little baby girls
I'm
are
hoping they're
missing?
still around somewhere. I'm hoping they're still somewhere.
Yeah, but you
alive.
don't have them right now. You're
I
not
know.
reading stories to them at night.
I know.
You're not giving them midnight snacks. You're not giving them their medicine. You're not waking up with them in the morning.
I know this.
So that should cause you pain.
It does cause me pain.
But I don't see that. I don't see that. I want to see the Chris that cares. I want to see the Chris that, feels bad about what he did and wants to, get this off his chest and be done with this. And let us find your little girls so that they're not out there in the middle of a field or whatever somewhere. Like, don't do that.
I love those girls to death.
Then show us that. Show us that. Show us this Chris, not this Chris.
I'm not showing you that Chris. I'm showing you the Chris that cares about his girls and his wife. Just because I haven't shed a tear, it shouldn't make you feel like that the love isn't there for them.
It's weird. It doesn't make sense to me.
I understand that.
You have to.
I totally see where you're coming from. Trust me, there's nothing. Just because
Chris, people can be pushed to the point where they do something that they regret. It happens every single day.
I know.
But part of what makes you a man is the guy that goes, I really fucked up, but this is what I did, and I'm going to pay for what I did, and I'm going to tell you what I did, and I'm going to be honest about it.
Chris, we can keep talking to you once we find these girls, okay? So once we find these girls and your wife, right, no matter how we find them, no matter what condition they're in, we can keep talking to you, and you can tell us, guys, it's not as bad as it looks. And you can say, let me tell you what happened. I was never comfortable with you, Graham, or with you, Tam. No, I wasn't comfortable yet, but now that everything's known, now that these girls are found and Shan'ann's found, however they're found, it's okay. We can keep talking to you. Okay?
Chris, did Shan'ann do something to them?
No, I don't know.
I'm serious.
I have no clue.
No, you would have known, because they didn't leave the house. Did Shan'ann do something to them, and then did you feel like you had to do something to Shan'ann?
No, they were at the house when I left. They were there.
They weren't there. They didn't leave. They vanished.
They were there.
The only way they could have left is in your truck.
There's no way, because I didn't just throw them in my truck.
You know your truck has GPS,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Because you even told your boss,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going through separation, or maybe staying
Yeah.
at a friend's house, whatever. You know that thing pings every 10 seconds?
Yep.
So we will know
You can't turn it off.
exactly
I know.
And
where
your-
you went.
And your company's giving that to us.
I know.
Okay. Are we not asking the right questions, Chris?
You're asking all the questions.
What are we not asking you right? What are we doing wrong?
You're not doing anything wrong.
Did Shan'ann do something?
I think she did anything to these kids. We both love them with all our hearts. There's no way.
It could have been an accident. Something happened in the house that you know about. You failed the polygraph test, Chris. This is not about, did you leave and your wife vanished and you didn't know anything about it. That was not what you were asked, okay?
Okay.
We know that something happened to all three of them. But I want to know, did something happen to these baby girls first that you had to take into your own hands and deal with?
You had to clean it up for Shan'ann.
Chris, you gotta tell us. There's something that happened to these baby girls. Look at them.
I know. Before you came in, I was just watching videos.
We have no doubt you love these girls with all of your heart. I have no doubt. But we make mistakes.
And that's okay.
It's what we do with those mistakes that make us who we are.
Chris, it seems like you're thinking about it right now. What are you thinking about?
She couldn't have.
I feel like you cleaned up for her. I feel like that's the type of guy that you are. Which one of these has the breathing thing?
Well, they both have inhalers, but she has the EOE, encephalitis esophagitis.
Did she have problems breathing?
And only like with her allergies and whatnot, like if she had anything next, but she's home with the endoscopies and everything and the surgeries I told you about.
Do you think she had trouble breathing that night? And Shan'ann freaked out? And didn't want to live without her baby girl?
I don't think so.
Now, I understand that. We had a mom in Castle Rock that suffocated both her baby girls. She's like, my husband was going to take them, and she's like, I just couldn't handle. I thought I was doing right by them. I thought I was saving them pain. And I get it.
Why? How's she saving the pain?
Because she didn't want them to have to live without their mom. Chris, you took them out of the house with their blankets and their animals. Like, that's because you cared. That's what a caring dad does.
I mean, I'm always caring for these kids. There's nothing in this for my life.
I believe that. I believe that, and I believe someone made a mistake, whether it was you or Shan'ann. And you either cleaned up after Shan'ann or you made the mistake. And I mean, I want to believe that maybe Shan'ann did it and you felt compelled to fix this so Shan'ann didn't look bad. That's what I want to believe. But I don't know, you're not telling me that, so it makes me think the worst. Like, did you do that to all three of them?
I did not do anything to these kids. Not do anything.
What did Shan'ann do to them? Tell us, Chris. Chicks are crazy.
Can I talk to my dad or something?
Absolutely.
Come.
Do you want to bring him in here?
Nuh-uh.
Absolutely.
Come.
Do you want to bring him in here?
Nuh-uh. I just can't talk to my dad. Like, I flew across the country.
Hey, Chris.
I can't.
How about this?
common in these types of cases that there's some victim blaming, so that it's easier for the suspect to say, yeah, it wasn't all just me. Like, I did it because they pushed me to it, or I was forced to do it, giving Chris a possible reason as to why this would have happened.
I believe that she's a controlling person. Maybe doesn't listen to you as much as she should. I think that she can do whatever she wants and you can't.
Agent Coder and Agent Lee are providing him other alternatives, other possibilities as to what may have happened, other reasons that something may have happened, in an effort to try to see what his reaction is going to be.
Chris, did Shan'ann do something to them?
No, I don't know.
I'm curious.
I have no clue.
No, you would have known, because they didn't leave the house. Did Shan'ann do something to them, and then did you feel like you had to do something to Shan'ann?
They were at the house when I left. They were there.
Vilifying Shan'ann, it's a technique that we can use to eventually get the actual truth. We just needed to find Shan'ann and the girls.
Maybe Shan'ann did it, and you felt compelled to fix this so Shan'ann didn't look bad. I feel like you cleaned up for her. But I don't know, you're not telling me that, so it makes me think the worst. Like, did you do that to all three of them?
I did not do anything with these kids.
He was definitely more deflated. He was kind of hanging his head down. He kind of seemed exhausted from it all, honestly.
Can I talk to my dad or something? I had a fight. Flew across the country.